Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Prospero.Ai stock market live stream. Welcome in. Let's get everybody in here. Let's see how many heads we have in here. I'm looking at the live stats. 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. There we go. The numbers are trickling higher. The markets are green today. We're in double digits. 10 people. Welcome, everyone. The markets are higher, all green today. We're seeing the Russell lead for once, so that's a switch up we're seeing in the market dynamics. Good to see these small caps going higher today. We have a lot of great news stories to cover surrounding the market. We have Netflix earnings coming up. We're going to give you guys a SPY and a QQQ update. If you're checking in the Prospero app, you probably saw that the SPY net option sentiment is slightly dropping. So we have to discuss about what is the next move for the markets. It seems like we're getting on some maybe thinner ice, and maybe a little pullback could happen sooner than everybody wants. But I'll let George discuss that further. And we have United Airlines stock popping higher today, up over 14%, super strong move. They gave a strong report, but also strong guidance, and they're going to be buying back some stock. I'll tell you just how much, and we'll discuss if airlines are a good investment if you haven't seen us talk about the airline sector before. And then we have ASML with a pretty strange story where supposedly their numbers got leaked on their website and they weren't too good. So we have to talk about ASML, Nvidia, the whole semi space as a whole. And then building off of that, we have the author of Black Swan, Nassim Taleb, talking about how this is the most treacherous the market has been in 20 years. And there's some pretty wild stats around that story, which I'll share. Hey, George, welcome to the stream. And then we're also going to be building on a story that we talked about a little while ago, Oklo, if you guys were on that stream. It's a nuclear startup, Sam Altman's Spock. We have a lot of moves happening in the nuclear energy space, so we'll talk about those. And Oklo stock is up like crazy today, up over 40%. So a lot to discuss there. And then we have Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky spinning Airbnb as the next Amazon, possibly. So I'll let you know why that is the case and how that branding and marketing of Airbnb will play out over the coming years. But some interesting announcements there. And then last but not least, we have Tom Brady making moves, becoming an NFL owner. And if you don't know the franchise, you got to stick around. It's not any of the teams he played for, and we also have news where private equity firms are going to be allowed to purchase NFL ownership stakes. So we're going to discuss how that may affect the actual investing world in the stock market, and if you can get any exposure to sports teams through the market in the coming years with the new updates that we've seen. And then last but not least, at the end of the stream, we'll head over and do the model portfolio update. So you'll get to watch us make live moves at the closing bell. But where I want to start today is right with the SPY and the QQQ, because they've had strong readings in Prospero for some time now, but it seems that the SPY is starting to lose its grasp on the firm bull narrative, George. So how are you feeling? I saw the SPY net option sentiment as low as I think 31 this morning. So give us an up-to-date view in your opinion.
37. Yeah, I mean, we put up our first bear screener in a while. And I was just seeing, I wanted to take a quick look what's on there. Oh, JetBlue's made it on there. Yeah, it's a little bit, we're getting a little bit worried. It's going back in the other direction. I mean, we're a little bit worried, but also, like, I was on a space last week and I kind of was asked, like, well, shouldn't people be hedging more for the election? Like, aren't they worried? And I was kind of like, well, yeah, I kind of think so. And it might be coming soon. So yeah, I mean, the election's coming up fast. And so I think being smart around that, planning well around it is important. So we're being cautious. I think we're pretty equal long short right now. and volatility is still there. It's a tough market right now, but we're up about 75% on the year still. We released
Mm.
our 9-month results this week, so proud of that. Even though it's been a hard year, it's been a good year for us.
So you're not bearish, you're just kind of neutral right now. Would that be fair to say?
I'm not what?
You're not bearish, you're just coming back from being net long and being a little bit more neutral.
Yeah, a little bit more neutral, but nervous for the election. Like I've said for a while around the election that we probably lean a little bearish on it. So it's got to even out in between now and then. I mean, obviously, if everything is looking pretty good in our signals, we'll be leaning towards that, but probably not too much.
One interesting thing I did see with you know, a few months ago, it seemed like the market was taking Trump's comments like he was going to be the president because I think in the polls at that time he was leading by a lot, and then the polls kind of got a lot closer. I think a lot had Kamala even like slightly ahead. But there's this thing called poly market, which is you can actually bet on the election with real money. And I checked it today, and Trump is projected to win 60% to 40%. So he's really pulled away. Kamala was ahead in that just like a week or two ago. So it seems
Poly
like
market.
yeah. So it seems like maybe the market is taking his comments and weighting it more again because he said something about how he thinks the tariffs need to go up over 10% yesterday. And I think that combined with this ASML number leak story that we got, where they posted really weak numbers on their website early before their earnings were supposed to happen, kind of spooked the chips and semi stocks, which obviously affect the entire market nowadays. And maybe that's why we're getting a little bit more cautious in what we're seeing. And like you were saying with the election. So, how do you feel about all
So
of
I
that
just
happening?
Yeah, first I pulled up Kalshi, which is another one, and that's 55.45. Um, but it is interesting. It was like 50-50 on October 8th. And since then, Trump has he got as high as 57 and now back down to 55. So I don't know what's going on there, but like you also have to look at what's it's always important to look at in betting markets is I would say the Dallas Cowboys factor, right? The Dallas Cowboys always have people, they have a lot of fans, they always have people betting on them. So bets and probabilities are not necessarily the same thing.
Would you take like people wagering money and the results and the data you see from that like more you think that's more accurate than polling where people really could just say whatever they want, there's no repercussions? Like at least they're going to lose money if they vote the wrong way with this.
I think polls are tough. I think it all when we've seen them break, but they all have flaws. But I think people will bet on, like, look at DJT stock and how overvalued it is. If you're wondering if people are willing to bet on Trump, right? That right there. I mean, that is like a pure momentum stock that, hey, you might make money on DJT stock if he wins, but it won't be because of the value. It'll just be, it's a pure momentum play, right? So you could look at these betting markets as like a lower downside. But I guess it's like, it's a lose everything. So maybe it is better to bet on DJT than Trump to win the election. Um, but I honestly think that's incredibly dumb overall, just to like bet on this kind of stuff because it's just like, especially if it's a win all, lose all thing, it's just like nobody really knows how to predict this stuff. And polls have we've seen them fail miserably, at least in the Clinton Trump election, they just were way off. And we actually saw Cambridge Analytica play into that. So yeah, I don't believe in it.
And how about the other side of the story, the ASML part of it, where they leaked numbers yesterday that were pretty weak? I think the guidance is what really spooked people. And ASML stock, I think, was down 16% yesterday, and it kind of bled into all the other semis. Does that change your thought process around NVIDIA, the AI story, any of that
They
at
actually
all?
said AI demand was robust still. But it was, some of the other demand concerns. So, I mean, I think obviously there was something that Trump said that moved the market again too. I think that accentuated that more. But there's at the end of the day, right? If all tides are going to rise in semis, if that's the theory, then something like ASML is a great buy, right? And we talk about that because it doesn't have the same like United States risks, and maybe that's a way that it became, U.S. versus China risks, and maybe that's a way it became undervalued. But at the end of the day, right, we're definitely seeing some winners emerge. NVIDIA, obviously, the biggest one in terms of what they could do for AI. And I think Blackwell is another step, even further forward. And even, Broadcom some of like the mobile car, things like that. They're doing very well. So I do think that, you do often say that I don't want to say there's a bubble, and that's true, but there's a big line between like a bubble and um maybe it's not going to be every semiconductor company that does well. Maybe there will be winners and losers, which is, by the way, how markets traditionally work, where there's winners and losers. This AI thing has just been so big that it's made everybody a winner, and just because that changes a little bit doesn't mean it's a bubble.
So building on this topic of conversation, I saw a pretty I would say it's an alarming stat, but I don't know if there's any kind of weight in it to you. So there was this photo going around Twitter. I think Heisenberg, which is a good account, posted it, and it's where I saw it. It was comparing Nvidia in 2024 to Cisco in the year 2000, and the percentage of market cap that these stocks have to the overall GDP of America. And right now, Nvidia is at 11.7% of GDP. And when Cisco peaked in 2000, it was at 5.5%. And that was building on the case that AI is a bubble. So if you're someone that doesn't believe AI is a bubble, I don't know how much credence you put in this, but does that type of does this stat alarm you or catch your attention at all?
I mean, Cisco was kind of just a tech company that had a lot of, I would say, especially corporate market share servers, right? And the server markets were expanding. But if you look at more, like if you take Moore's law seriously, which I do, and that's basically like, tech is exponentially growing, to put it very simply, right? It does make sense that also the largest company would grow exponentially. But you know, if you think about it just like this, right? AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, right? They are NVIDIA's biggest customers, right? So you're actually talking about like uh, an almost insatiable demand for NVIDIA chips by the three companies that are like close to it in size, right? And you didn't have anything like that with servers, right? Companies needed servers, but I never had anyone describe themselves as like, I would never think anyone would describe, the companies at the time, right? I don't think Microsoft at that time had an insatiable demand for servers, especially because they were just like much more concerned about PCs, right? That's what was their big thing. So I do think that Nvidia is on a whole other plane. And I just think, obviously we talk about macro concerns, tensions with China, things like that. But other than that, I think other than like a macro force, like getting in the way of Nvidia, that train is a freight train. And it's a freight train because you get something like Blackwell, right? Where each release is that much better than the next and also better than what anyone else puts out there. Which is like, if you think about it on a historical scale, it's actually pretty remarkable, right? Because other than, say like the Google search algorithm, right? You do traditionally see competitors, right? Even something like, Coca-Cola that, you know, really took the country by storm, became so popular. There was a Pepsi that came along, right? And it's not the same thing, but what I'm basically saying, there is no Pepsi equivalent of Nvidia. There's like Nvidia chips, and then there's everything else. And if you want to move at the fastest speeds, you want Nvidia chips. And that's just like, that's why they have over 80% market share. It's remarkable what they do, and you really have to look to Jensen Huang on that one. It's very, very hard to innovate at scale, and he continues to do it.
I love that Coke Pepsi analogy. I've never thought about it like that before. But one stock I wanted to bring up today because they're in the headlines was United Airlines after they had their earnings, and the stock is up 14%. They had strong earnings and strong guidance, and they also announced a plan to buy back $1.5 billion of their stock. And I thought it'd be a good update for, we have a lot of probably new viewers nowadays, to talk about just the airline sector as a whole, your opinions on it, beyond just United itself.
At a high level, I actually think the airline industry uh, has gotten, in some ways, lucky, because if you look at where transportation has gone, or innovation on some of these things, it's just so interesting that there hasn't necessarily been like, we are like, we've gotten a little more modern, but like air travel hasn't changed that much since, the original jetliners were there. Like it's not that different in terms of the speeds or the comfort. If anything, it's got a little less space. So there's this, well, they've been around for a while, and we need air travel, and especially like if you have the right terminals and routes and everything there. But yeah, I think that there's kind of an existential threat, and I don't think there's like flying cars. It was funny, I got called a hater by someone, I think, on TikTok, for like Joby Aviation. I don't think the solution is really there, but I do also think, that is, you kind of look at it and you say, as technology grows, the way flight travel works, there should be some kind of improvement that we can do. I was actually, I kind of paused in the middle because I didn't see Coin had passed Meta, and that's very, very interesting, because we've been talking about, wow, it's the end of an era. Um, we've been talking about cryptocurrency as like the one thing that we really like holding through the election. So it might be, that might be the last sign we need to take on the position. I mean, net option sentiment has been fixed at 100 for however long, but downside going down, upside going up. I'll look tomorrow, but it might be time to act. I should have added
That's
it yesterday. It was looking really good in momentum score, to be honest. It's kind of a miss.
so I know technicals aren't everything to you, but like Bitcoin is kind of breaking out right now, so maybe that's going hand in hand with coin, and they're kind of
Oh, of
expecting.
course. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think that's just like, when we talk about coin, we're talking about Bitcoin
yeah.
largely.
Just circling back to the airline topic before I move on, I just wanted to say I saw this amazing photo of, it was 100 years apart, and it was like the first airplane test, and then the Starship that SpaceX just had, and it was like the caption was just 100 years apart. Just kind of crazy to think about, like how far, I guess, rocket technology. It's like you kind of mentioned how airplane technology hasn't gotten any better, but it's like they just skipped. They're not making airplanes better. They just moved on to rockets now, like straight away. But it's kind of cool to think
Yeah.
about how it's so close in time.
No, it definitely has. I'm like feeling like I'm actually feeling, I'm looking now when I added coin. because I'm feeling pretty dumb about this, to be honest.
Why?
I feel like I should have. It has been doing so well in the signals, and this doesn't look updated. 10:11. Yeah, it's not updated. I was like, what is going on here? Sometimes it doesn't update. But no, I'll look at that better. But yeah, I'm feeling like I missed the boat on it. I was just like looking at those charts, and I'm like, damn, it's been doing really well, and coin's just been sitting there up at 100 net option sentiment. But
Don't beat
it's been a
yourself
little
up too
volatile.
much.
I'm gonna forgive myself.
You're beating the market by 75%. That's a lot more than most people can say. So don't beat yourself up too
Yeah.
much.
Thanks for the support, Stephen.
Always. Um, So if you're a usual viewer, you heard us talk about this stock a few months ago. We mentioned it, Oklo, the Sam Altman nuclear stock that was a SPAC, and he got it listed. So that stock is going crazy today. It was up over 40%. And there's been a lot of headlines recently about all of these big tech companies, investing in nuclear energy. I think today's news was Amazon investing 500 million. The story was they're going to develop small modular reactors. I know there was a stigma about nuclear energy for a while, but it seems like the way the market's reacting seems like that's going away. So, are we going to see this nuclear energy sector maybe be a growth sector in the coming years?
It's kind of funny how these things work because, like, the big problem with nuclear was like kind of like you had Chernobyl, and then you had Fukushima in after that tsunami, and people are kind of like, oh yeah, this is kind of dangerous, and then people cool off, and then all of a sudden they start to like, there's a new power need, right? And all of a sudden I guess the danger is negligible. And I think that's kind of just like, I think if you could encapsulate the one problem of how we got here in late stage capitalism, it's that right there, where it's just like there seems to be like, even good, logical, rational thought where people are like, hey, maybe this is a little too dangerous and we should move in other directions. And then, nothing really changes. I mean, the big problem, I don't know if people really know this, but you can't dispose of nuclear waste, right? There's nowhere you can really put it. We hollow out mountains and things, and that, like, they haven't solved that problem, and that's a pretty big problem, especially if things like especially if there's going to be a lot more nuclear needed. I mean, at the end of the day, right? They can keep loading these things into mountains, and hopefully it doesn't get into the water. Although, like, seeing problems with water in other places, I wouldn't necessarily guarantee. And that's where you're just like, okay, maybe they can do this, but who knows? Like, we're not necessarily that great at safety, especially if it's corporations that are expecting to police themselves, right? So you've got that problem. And then there's, the meltdown problem or the terrorist problem. And that's kind of a scary problem, especially when you look at terrorism. If anyone wants a very interesting Google, look up the Stuxnet virus, which is a virus that is on most of our computers that the US government invented to penetrate as many systems as possible so they could do things like, this is actually like nuts that this happened. I normally am just like, oh God, like US government, like it's embarrassing a little bit. But this is actually kind of like crazy that they executed it, even though it's weird. So to enrich uranium, you need to use like a special kind of centrifuge to do that. And like a lot of computers, the computers at the and when I say a lot, I mean almost every computer has a Stuxnet virus on it. It's just like it was built to penetrate systems, and it did it very well. And basically it was on these Iranian, it was on these a facility for Iranian enrichment. And they basically sped up the centrifuges to sabotage their operation. So that is all to say, if we can do that, right, it stands to reason that others. Now, I will say, like, as like a lot of these nuclear facilities don't necessarily have internet access, so they don't kind of have that kind of thing. But you can kind of penetrate some of these systems, and there's interesting ways. That whole thing with the blimp, the Chinese blimp that came over. You never know if they're running tests to see if they can like remotely, break into a system. That was one of the things I was personally wondering. But anyway, yeah, there's always that the proliferation, like it is something that is concerning, right? I don't think we should just kind of be like, oh, well, we need the power. It would be really nice if we could say spend a little more and invest in wind power, invest in solar power, because it's a little more expensive, but maybe if there's a problem at a solar facility, one or two people get hurt. Same with wind. I think that would probably even be harder. You just have to avoid maybe a turbine falling or something, or an explosion. But yeah, significantly more people affected, especially like some of these new facilities. They're actually looking at different kinds of reactions. And more modern reactions that generate more power also are more catastrophic if something happens to them. So it is. You think about what happened with Chernobyl, and actually, I was on a panel with the ex-CTO of the United States like a year and a half ago, and we had a very interesting back and forth um, around. They were just like, the U.S. seems to have a policy of like, we don't want to get in the way of innovation, and I kind of brought up the fact that I think in the Cold War, the Soviets and the US both kind of looked at it that way. Like they had to beat each other, and like whatever innovations they could do, they wanted to do. And that kind of worked out when the Soviets cut too many corners and Chernobyl happened. And I was like, we're kind of engaging in a similar thing with China right now. And in a lot of ways, we're more similar to the Soviets at this point. Especially when you start looking at things like, decay of our infrastructure, our education system lagging a little more. Yeah, you worry if we start cutting corners to like roll out nuclear quickly, if we're opening ourselves up to the same problems.
Yeah, that was the space race, right? And now we're in the AI race. And I've seen people say that energy is the limiting factor in growth. So do you think that's true? Is there even enough energy to like for the demand that AI is having for it?
Oh, I mean, there's not necessarily enough energy. There's not necessarily enough compute. Like, not for all of the companies that are going to want it, right? Um, Especially, we're in a phase of AI, and this is an important distinction, right? Before, to a certain extent, you had to have, humans, running experiments, even setting up automations. But we're more and more getting to a point where, computers will be allocating resources for themselves. And at that point, when computers are kind of self-running, self-exploring, predictive problem solutions, they can kind of provision as much compute as there is.
So Chris on Twitter is asking, what are some good investments for energy? I think within nuclear, outside of nuclear, just energy sector.
Inside of
No, just like it doesn't have to be nuclear, just any
I mean,
energy.
CEG longer term is good. I mean, I think that's the one we really, um, that's the one we really like. I mean, I can get back I can get back to you. There's a CCJ in nuclear. I mean, I do generally like for all that, I do generally like nuclear better than a lot of other things, but I still don't like it.
Yeah, so Chris, you should stick around for the model portfolio update because you'll see a lot of stock recommendations then, see what we're adding and dropping. Um, One stock I wanted to get to today because the CEO was saying some bold things on CNBC today was Airbnb. The CEO, Brian Chesky, was on there talking about how they are planning to launch several businesses each year going forward that all have the potential to generate 1 billion in revenue per year. And they asked him, are they all going to be related to travel? And he said, no, they'll probably start off that way, but then they'll kind of go away from the core business over time. And he compared themselves to Amazon and how Amazon started as a bookstore, online bookstore. Then they had CDs, DVDs, general goods, AWS. Seems like a great company to compare yourself to, but how believable is this? Does it change your opinion on Airbnb? Do you like the stock? How do you feel?
You know what it seems like to me? It seems like to me that they're going to have some really bad results. And a lot of people have been saying that Airbnbs are down, they've been tougher to rent, right? There's a lot of regulations, like the hotel lobby swings back, right? And like whenever you're talking about like nebulous other businesses that you're going to get into, right? Like one of the things we've talked about in the past with AMC, right? Is like you got to invest in your core business. Like when they're investing in gold mines, that's not a very good sign that you have ideas for your core business, right? This, that they're going to have other things, right? Basically, he's saying that he's concerned about their core business. And it's one thing like Jeff Bezos had this plan about Amazon forever, right? And he executed. Like it's very different for him, who's never really talked about Airbnb being a bunch of other things, to start talking about it, right? That to me says he's worried about his business declining. And the only other way he sees to save that is entering other things. Um, and who knows, right? It's a tough business to be in, right? If you're going to start booking travel or whatever and everything, like, the hotels.com, like, booking, those conglomerates, they have so many relationships. They have such a head start. Like, where are you really adding value in travel? And the other thing I've started to see people talk about is that they think the quality in Airbnb is declining just because there's not as much money in it and people are cutting corners. Um, and I've certainly had, some experiences on Airbnb that weren't as good as I originally thought.
So it sounds like you think Airbnb could possibly be the Yahoo of that sector where they got out to a good start, but then kind of fade away. One thing I want to ask is like we saw United's strong guidance. It would seem to me that Airbnb and airlines would kind of their businesses would go hand in hand almost with travel. Do you think like you could see strong airline numbers and weak Airbnb numbers? That'd be an indictment on their business individually, I guess, right?
Definitely. But I mean, like they there's a certain they have to expand into other markets internationally and that kind of thing, right? Because there's a certain amount of saturation that they reached in the US. Like there was full awareness that they existed, right? And then people started to buy them to rent them out. And now there's like a retraction, right? I think they really maxed out their expansion. And then if you're talking about other countries, like it isn't necessarily, something that I really want to do in certain countries, right? Like I think I count on like the value and the safety of like a hotel, right? You're putting a lot of trust in another country where you don't necessarily like, especially if the law enforcement is really kind of unknown. Um, it's tough. It can be tough, like to trust that, and you might just prefer um a uh a hotel at that point.
Yeah, all good points. We are about to start our last topic that we have planned for today. So I'll tell all of our viewers if you have any other questions, we love getting them. So just feel free to comment them. We'll be happy to answer them. Good to see all of the people in the stream today. But I wanted to get to this headline of Tom Brady becoming an NFL owner. of the Las Vegas Raiders, and they had a valuation of over $7 billion. We've talked about how these sports valuations are just going up like crazy recently. There was another billionaire who just bought a 27% stake in the Chargers, Tom Gores. I saw a story about how the Dodgers are about to become the first sports team to hit $1 billion in revenue in a single year. So the sports sector is going crazy right now. There was also another rule in the NFL how they're allowing private equity companies to buy stakes in teams for the first time ever. How can us retail investors get exposure? Is any of this going to come to the stock market? It's like all these gains are kept for the billionaires. Where is it for us?
Um, I think like a lot of these private equity companies are public, or at least some of them, and you can kind of get conduit access through that. But it is just so interesting. You think about the Raiders, and they don't really strike you as like a well-run organization, but they just keep going up in value. And I think that this private equity, I think that it's a very interesting change, because I think ultimately what it's going to lead to is a lot of these like family businesses, like maybe not getting to like, run their team into the ground like the New York Giants. Like I think like that. And um I think people probably want, to a certain extent, like there to be, I'd say, broader governance is probably the best way to describe it. Like at the end of the day, I think some of these owners might look at it as like, hey, even if some of these teams are easy to beat because they have these like, nepotism based situations, it's not necessarily great for the league um to have that happen. So I think that that's why you start with this private equity. Then, that's what happens with any company. It becomes more and more kind of owned. The more outside capital it takes in, the more ownership and the more, kind of governance changes over time. But you can only, like, if you want to own a team, you can always own the Green Bay Packers, right? That's publicly traded. So uh, I say go for that. They're as good a team to own as any. You don't need to own like a private equity shop where you're just getting a little piece of it. And I wonder their stock performance. I kind of like,
Yeah, I think the only other team that I'm aware of in the U.S., I think like their soccer team that is public, Real Madrid maybe. But I think the Atlanta Braves are also public, and I think you mentioned how you shorted them before.
yeah, Batra.
Hmm.
Um, oh, it's not. It's they do some sales, but it's not trade. They sell. I think they might sell to their to just their like season ticket holders. Six stock offering. Yeah, their last one added 176,000 new shareholders. Maybe people should have done that.
Yeah, the
I'm a little
valuations are
interested in this.
skyrocketing.
Yeah, new
Okay.
shareholders recover approximately. Yeah, California did 8%. Texas did 5% of the shareholders in there.
Wait, what do you mean that the
The
states
state
are
in which the
invested?
shareholders lived in.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Boy, things have turned very, very green. I
Oh,
wonder where
yeah?
everything is. Are we doing the switch over now?
Yes, we can do the switch over. Everybody stick here with me while George does the switch, and we'll see you on the other side, George. Uh,
Yep.
I'm going to get a live look at the signals we are seeing in Prospero for the QQQ and the SPY. Um, this camera is still connected, George, if you could hear me. I think you usually shut it. But let me look at the QQQ, which has been hovering in the the low 60s recently. Okay, so the QQQ has pulled back to 55 for net options sentiment in Prospero. It's still a bullish level, but it is lower than we've been seeing it in recent days. And if you look at the time series graph in Prospero, it's starting to turn down lower, which is I guess I wouldn't say it's concerning, but it's something to keep a watch of for sure. And now I want to take a look at the SPY. And I would say this. We'll see when George gets back on the other side, but I would say the SPY is starting to look a little concerning because it was always lagging the QQQ and net option sentiment in about the mid 40s, high 40s. But now I'm seeing a 35 reading, and if you look at the time series graph, there's a clear decline recently. So I don't know if the moves we'll make today is just going to maintain the neutral nature that George was describing in the beginning of the stream, or if we're going to go a little bit more short. But we'll have to wait and see what George decides to do when he gets back. I see 808 people have tuned into the stream today. Thank you all so much. If you enjoyed the topics we covered today, please like this stream. It helps with the YouTube and Twitter algorithms as we try to grow. But I thought the nuclear energy conversation and topic, that was probably my favorite of the day. Seeing the move that Oklo stock made today was kind of insane, especially how after we had talked about it on the stream a few weeks ago, that was kind of awesome to see. I love when we highlight something before it kind of happens in the markets. But I see George is back in here. So
yeah, let's do it. Okay. I can't believe the year is almost over.
Yeah, time really does fly as you get older, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I also just hate the changeover of the new year. Especially if I'm doing very well.
Start over, start from scratch.
Well, I mean, I guess I've done well every year, but it's like, yeah. It's like, all right, starting from zero again. Okay, we added coin on the 14th. Oh shit. All right, we're copying things. Okay. Oh, I'm not sharing yet.
So the stock that appeared on our short-term bull list that I tweeted about this morning was Disney, and that's doing well today. So that's good to see for all the people who responded to on Twitter.
I guess Brent didn't get to the ones from yesterday. There were a lot. Did we send out a letter yesterday? No, I'm just like.
Yeah, yesterday at 4 p.m.
Oh. Do you see? Oh. Ah, that's it. That was added on the 15th. Okay, I'm being an idiot. All right, just wasting time bagging myself into a corner for no reason. All right, what are the
SPY is 35 and QQQ is 55. QQ net option sentiment is at 55, SPY at 35. This is the same downturn that made us more cautious yesterday, but perhaps too cautious. We're definitely looking at backing off that.
Okay. And then we need just Chipotle. Give me that report.
Small cap value making a big comeback, and it looks like value in general. We'll take that into account as we add, and perhaps we'll look into a profitability trim tomorrow. If the trend doesn't move.
I think we need a little. It's so bright. Oh, that's going to be helpful. Oh, we're definitely ahead of the pace. All right, let's see how everything looks today. I wonder how. Yeah, we were in on Boeing.
Yeah, I saw that on the short-term bull list, I believe on Monday. So Prospero knew. I saw the story they got some like stock sales, like 10 billion or something of cash.
What do we got here? CCOI is always. Damn. Did we add UHS yesterday? We didn't. We should have. All right, more healthcare, I guess. And you know what? We're getting Boeing. I don't know if we added. Did we add HSBC yesterday? I think we did. Damn, ASML is getting decimated. Is it down again today?
Yeah, it's down 6% today.
All right. Not a crazy amount of moves. Okay, what are we doing? We are doing this. A later day than yesterday. Let us see what is going on here. How many do we have left of these? 30. Oh, well, we really had Apple.
ASDS is moving a lot today.
Yeah, we did it right. All right, so I think I feel good about. What's SAB? I didn't even notice these. Well, we can get rid of those. We don't even know what they are. So that's better to trim. Okay. That's done. Great. And we're just going to go ahead and have it sent out. Well, it's not 3 minutes.
Wow, this is the first ever early we've been on a Wednesday stream.
I know we're getting quick. All right. Now what I want to do is check out. What is going on with these? That looks good. UNH, I'm holding because it's going in the right direction. All right, I'm holding all that. Yeah, I think I'm gonna hold tight until tomorrow on that. All right. Any questions? We're done. We finished all the work.
No questions. We're done for the day. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week. We'll be back live streaming Monday morning. But until then, see you guys. Thanks for joining, George.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.